This is not a vacation story. This is an autobiography of a rescue mission, a liberation that started with a spreadsheet and ended on the open sea. I'm Eleanor Vance, and I am, or at least I was, the keeper of the coin, the silent financial engine of my family. For 50 years, my identity was synonymous with the nest egg, the vast, unspent savings that my children, Clara and Diana, viewed as their sacred, guaranteed inheritance. They called me frugal. They called me sensible. What they really meant was predictable, passive, and profitable. But on my 70th birthday, the profit margin shifted. It ceased to be theirs. It became mine. My husband Harold and I started saving not from abundance but from necessity. He was a civil engineer. I was a bookkeeper. We were architects of a middle-class dream built on compound interest and delayed gratification. We lived by the Little Red Ledger, the book that meticulously tracked every deposit, every dividend, every cautious withdrawal. This wasn't some musty, dusty relic. It was the financial backbone of the Vance family, a constant, tangible proof of prudence. The final figure, the one etched onto the last page, was substantial enough to make both Clara and Diana, with all their high-powered salaries, quietly envious. We installed in our children a deep and abiding respect for the nest egg, a respect that, as they grew older, curdled into proprietary expectation. The security blanket. Clara, the oldest, would call it with an affectionate roll of her eyes. She was the lawyer, sharp, analytical, and utterly focused on upward mobility. She saw the money as the down payment on her children's eventual Ivy League tuition, a safety net she was already factoring into her complex financial modeling. Diana, the executive, was more emotional, more possessive. For her, the nest egg represented the final, unassailable proof that she had surpassed her humble beginnings. It was not just money. It was confirmation of their ultimate success, a legacy of wealth that would cement their position in their exclusive New York circles. She'd once told me, without a hint of irony, that my financial discipline was a gift to future generations. She meant her children, her future. My life, meanwhile, was a study in financial restraint. I mended my favorite trench coat until the fabric was paper thin. I cooked from scratch. I drove a 10-year-old sedan that Harold had affectionately nicknamed the Tank because it refused to quit. I chose my spectacles based on durability, not fashion. I didn't see deprivation. I saw control. I saw the growth in that ledger. But my daughters saw a mother who had stopped living. A mother whose primary function was to be the caretaker of their distant prosperity. "Mother, why don't you treat yourself to a new car?" Diana had asked once, scrolling through photos of a new convertible she was considering. "The Tank is embarrassing." "The Tank is paid for," I replied simply. "And it gets me where I need to go." This was the dynamic. They lived in a world of immediate gratification, paid for by the incomes I had helped them secure. I lived for a future that, by their design, belonged entirely to them. The true measure of their current lives, however, wasn't in phone calls or holiday visits, which became increasingly rare and rushed, but on the digital screens. I have a quiet life. My social calendar involves the library book club and the occasional gardening seminar. Theirs was a never-ending global itinerary, meticulously curated for public consumption. Clara's post, a blinding white beach in the Maldives. Her husband, in expensive swimwear, stood beside a perfectly crafted cocktail. Caption, "Resetting the Mind Palace." So much paperwork this quarter. This was absolutely necessary. Back to the grind soon. The flight to get there cost more than my entire annual heating bill. Diana's post, a panoramic view from a 5-star hotel rooftop in Dubai, glittering lights below. She was wearing a dress I wouldn't have dared touch in a store, smiling an exhausting, perfect executive smile. Caption, "Just a quick hop over for the summit." Worth the jet lag for this view. Hashtag global citizen, hashtag work perks. A quick hop over to the other side of the planet. Each like I gave them was a tiny silent affirmation of my role. The supportive, homebound mother cheering on her successful world-trotting heirs. I was their biggest fan, and they were my high-definition tormentors. They didn't mean to be cruel. They were simply unaware. They were living in a world of excess, yet their greatest anxiety was the thought of having to pay for a plane ticket for their mother. I started to compare their travel expenses with the few meager vacation requests I'd made over the years. A modest week in Maine, a long weekend in a nearby historic town, all met with a mixture of polite distraction and firm rejection, usually anchored by the same phrase, "Mother, it's just so costly right now." The contrast was no longer ironic, it was insulting. It was a clear statement. Their luxury was a necessity. My visit was an unaffordable extravagance. The phone calls for my 70th birthday in February were the final, decisive blow. I remember the exact weather that day. Gray, sleeting rain, matching the chill that settled in my chest. "Clara," I started, trying to keep the hope from my voice. "I found a decent fare to London in August. I could manage a week." Her response was instantaneous, rehearsed. "Oh, Mother, you know how complicated it is with the children's summer camp schedule. And my docket, the firm has me booked solid. Honestly, the logistical nightmare of finding a good flight, the cost of a rental car from Heathrow, it's just prohibitive. You know how focused you are on being prudent. That money could be better spent on, well, anything else, really. Prohibitive." She had just finished telling me about a weekend spa retreat her nanny was taking. "Then, Diana," I pitched the New York idea with caution, suggesting I could even rent a tiny Airbnb in a cheaper borough. "Absolutely not, Mom," Diana said, the faint sound of a high-end coffee machine whirring in the background. "You in a strange apartment? What if you need something? It would be a disaster, and no offense, but the cost of flying you, and then the inconvenience of me having to take a day off just to settle you in? It's too much. The city is relentless. You're better off staying put, really. Just wait for Thanksgiving. It's only 9 months away." 9 months. Another 9 months of watching my life through their social media feed, while they lived on the foundation of my savings. 9 months is a long time, Diana, I said, the inflection barely audible. "It flies by, Mom. Don't worry. Just keep things stable. That's all we ask. Keep things stable. Meaning, keep the nest egg safe and growing." They were not just declining my company, they were issuing an order. My value to them was purely financial. The moment I hung up, the sleet outside seemed to turn to ice. The little red ledger was sitting on my desk, waiting. I opened it. The number on the final page seemed to glare at me, mocking the fact that this fortune, which should have granted me freedom, was instead the source of my gilded cage. I closed the book. I walked away from the desk. I drove to the city, straight to the address for Global Voyages. I had spent a lifetime saving for my children's future. Now I was going to invest in my own present. Mr. Sterling was not a travel agent. He was a curator of impossible dreams. His office felt less like a storefront and more like a private library dedicated to geography. Maps covered the walls, and the scent of leather and old paper was intoxicating. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice a low, cultured baritone, after I had laid out my request. "The continuous year-long circumnavigation. It is doable. It is also an undertaking of immense complexity and cost." I looked him straight in the eye. "Mr. Sterling, you are looking at a woman who has spent 50 years managing other people's complexity and counting other people's costs. I want the best. I want the kind of trip that requires a passport and a financial commitment so comprehensive it becomes an act of self-redefinition." He smiled faintly, a slow dawning of understanding. "You're not buying a trip, Mrs. Vance. You're buying a new life. And this, my dear, is the price of admission." He presented the final figure. It was a staggering number, one that required the liquidation of 3/4 of the nest egg. It ate up nearly all the bonds, the blue-chip stocks, and the entire emergency fund Harold and I had cultivated. I stared at it. This number, this single transaction, would erase 50 years of self-denial. It was the value of their college degrees, multiplied. It was the entire future they had so carelessly assumed was theirs. "The suite must be a full veranda suite," I stated, my hand reaching for my pen. I want to be able to sit outside and feel the ocean air in every port. I want the all-inclusive fine dining option, not just the buffet. And I want the concierge to ensure that in every single port, from the most famous to the most obscure, I have a private car and a knowledgeable guide. No shared bus tours. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Sterling said, genuinely impressed. You want the complete, uncompromised experience. The golden passport. Exactly, I affirmed, signing the contract with a firm, decisive stroke. I want the experience that my financial discipline has earned, but my daughter's priorities have denied. I wrote the initial check. It felt like tearing up the little red ledger, page by page. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and profoundly right. The true battle began with the paperwork. I didn't just write a check. I had to move mountains of meticulously managed money. The transfer of the first tranche, the massive initial payment, was the shot across the bow. My financial life, which for decades had been as steady and predictable as a ticking clock, suddenly became a blur of high-volume, irregular transfers. I was moving money out of long-term investments and into my personal checking account, then transferring it to Global Voyages and its complex international banking partners. The girls, through their helpful security notifications, saw the activity first. They didn't see a complex transaction. They saw a financial hemorrhage. I remember staring at my computer screen, watching the figures drop, anticipating the inevitable incoming call. I felt a nervous flutter, but it wasn't fear of poverty. It was the adrenaline of the escape artist. Harold's coin collection, a source of great pride to him, was the next to go. It funded a 6-month segment of the trip. I sold it to a reputable dealer, specifying that the cash be wired directly. The dealer, an old acquaintance, asked, "Eleanor, is everything all right? This is sudden." "Everything is perfect, David," I told him. "I've decided I need liquid assets for a very large, non-negotiable expense." The final, largest move was the liquidation of the main investment portfolio. The final, undeniable proof of my decision. The broker, a young man who had always treated me with patronizing deference, actually called me, his voice shaking with professional alarm. "Mrs. Vance, I simply have to confirm this is correct. The order to liquidate your entire Vanguard portfolio. This is a significant sum. Are you aware of the penalties and the capital gains taxes you'll incur?" "This seems imprudent." "I am aware of everything, thank you, Mr. Jenkins," I replied calmly. "And in the grand scheme of things, Mr. Jenkins, the only thing that is truly imprudent is waiting around for permission to live." I confirmed the order. The money vanished from their view, and I waited for the storm. The calls that followed were no longer about my well-being. They were a frantic audit. Clara called first, her voice so tight it could have snapped. "Mother, what is the meaning of this Vanguard liquidation? Who authorized it?" "I've already called Mr. Jenkins. He says you were adamant." "This is not like you. This is the behavior of a vulnerable adult." I sat back, savoring the moment. "Vulnerable, Clara? I just managed a complex, high-value, tax-implicating financial transfer. That sounds like a display of quite formidable capacity, wouldn't you say, given your profession? Don't be deliberately obtuse. We're talking about almost $300,000. Where is it?" "We are filing a suspicious activity report with the bank. I refuse to stand by while someone takes advantage of you." "No one is taking advantage of me, Clara. I am taking advantage of my own hard work. The money is where it belongs, paying for my own expenses." Then came Diana, hysteria replacing Clara's controlled fury. "It's the inheritance, Mother. You're destroying it. My mortgage refinancing was counting on that equity down the line. And Liam needs tutoring, expensive tutoring. You are being selfish. You've lost your mind. Are you sick? Is this a secret medical emergency? Did a doctor tell you you only have a year left? Is that why you're spending it all?" Her words tumbled out. A raw confession of her financial dependency and her total disregard for my emotional state. "No, Diana," I said, my voice rising a little. "I am not sick. I am not dying. I am living. And I have never felt more sane." The money is being used for travel. Extensive travel. Travel? A little trip to Florida? That money would buy you a condo, not a trip. Stop this. I'm coming home. I'm taking a flight. I'm calling the bank. You are being scammed, and I will not let you ruin our future. Her mention of the ruin was the last thread to snap. I finally allowed myself to feel the resentment of 50 years. It is my money, Diana, not yours, not Clara's. It was the nest egg. It has hatched, and I am flying away. The next day, they landed. They didn't just come home, they staged a hostile takeover of my domestic space. They brought the conservator, Mr. Peterson, a man whose entire demeanor suggested legal impending doom, and the junior partner, Miss Cho, who carried a stack of documents like weapons. We have initiated a temporary restraining order on the remaining accounts, Mother, Clara announced, planting herself firmly in the armchair Harold used to love. We need to recover the funds already transferred. We are pursuing the money. You need to tell us where it went. We will treat this as a temporary lapse. A lapse in what? I asked, completely calm. In my adherence to your expectations? A lapse in judgment, Mother, Diana exclaimed, waving a printout of the brokerage account activity. Look at this, the Global Voyages transaction. That's a company. That's a scam. They've taken your money for a fictitious trip. Global Voyages is a perfectly reputable agency, Diana. Mr. Sterling is a well-respected professional. Then we will subpoena Mr. Sterling, Clara declared, already consulting Ms. Cho. We will find out what he told you. This is highly irregular. We are moving for an emergency motion for conservatorship. We need to protect your assets before you are completely depleted. The term hung in the air, conservatorship. It was a total rejection of my autonomy, a legal handcuff forged by their entitlement. They saw me as a leaky vessel that needed to be seized and steered for their benefit. I looked at their grim, determined faces. The faces of two successful women who, when faced with their own mother's self-determination, reacted not with curiosity or concern for her happiness, but with the cold, hard tools of legal enforcement. They were not my daughters in that moment. They were my creditors. Do what you must, I told them, standing up. But you will be wasting your money on legal fees. I am not confused. I am not vulnerable. I am simply done. Hearing was a sterile, impersonal affair. I wore my best, oldest suit, the one I had mended for the last time. I wanted to look exactly like the Eleanor Vance they thought they knew. The sensible, frugal, but ultimately competent woman who had built their fortune. Clara's presentation was devastatingly precise. She painted a picture of my sudden, uncharacteristic flight from financial stability, contrasting it with my lifetime of detailed accounting, using the little red ledger as the central piece of evidence. Your Honor, she concluded, her voice thick with fake emotion. My mother viewed this money as our family's future, as evidenced by this ledger. Her sudden, massive, and secretive transfers to an unverified travel entity are a radical departure from her lifelong character. We submit that this is the result of elder financial abuse, or a significant cognitive decline that renders her unable to manage her own estate. Diana was next, performing the role of the distraught, loving daughter. She cried, talking about how much she missed my wisdom and how this scam was ripping the family apart. It was manipulative, but effective. When the judge asked me for my defense, I kept it simple. I didn't deny the transfers. I didn't deny the magnitude. Your Honor, I am 70 years old. I have managed multi-million-dollar books for 3 major firms. I am of sound mind. I am the sole owner of the funds in question. I have a right to spend my money on my own happiness. And I have one witness who can attest to my absolute lucidity during the transaction in question, Mr. Elias Sterling. Mr. Sterling was magnificent. He walked in like a retired naval officer, radiating an air of unflappable authority. Clara's lawyer, a hired gun, approached him aggressively. Mr. Sterling, you received a payment totaling a sum of over $500,000 from Mrs. Vance. Is that correct? For the purpose of securing a year-long continuous global cruise, including all premium amenities, yes, that figure is correct. And you have no documentation of her being advised by a fiduciary or a family member on this transaction? Mrs. Vance made it clear that she was her own fiduciary. And given the nature of the voyage, which she described as a personal investment in deferred living, I saw no reason to believe she was operating under duress or external influence. On the contrary, how? The lawyer scoffed. She's liquidating a retirement portfolio for a party cruise. Your Honor, I must object to the characterization, Mr. Sterling interjected smoothly. Mrs. Vance spent 2 hours in my office. She questioned the contract's cancellation clauses, the force majeure provisions, and the currency exchange rates for the onboard purchases. She had a list of required ports that were logistically challenging and required private charters. She had alternative routes for each, demonstrating a comprehensive understanding of the logistics and the corresponding financial implications. She was not a confused old woman. She was a master negotiator with a clear, specific vision for her life. When she signed the final paperwork, she said, and I quote, "This is the cost of my freedom. And the price is surprisingly affordable." The judge watched my daughters, whose faces had gone pale, the polished sheen of their expensive suits suddenly looking cheap against the truth. The testimony of Mr. Sterling, the judge stated, tapping his pen on the bench, indicates sound mind and exceptional deliberate decision-making capacity. Mrs. Vance has satisfied the court that the expense, while large, is a considered, intentional, and legal transaction of her own assets. The suggestion of incapacity and undue influence is unsubstantiated. The emergency motion for conservatorship is permanently denied. He looked at me. Mrs. Vance, I wish you smooth sailing. I stood up, nodded to the judge, and walked past my daughters, who were now frantically whispering to their lawyers. I left them to their paperwork, their indignation, and the final crushing knowledge that their inheritance had vanished, not stolen, but spent, deliberately and legally, by the person who earned it. 3 weeks. That's all the time it took to transform Eleanor Vance from the keeper of the coin to the owner of the world. I kept the house, but only as a shell. I packed only what I needed. Everything else, the heavy furniture, the dusty books, the entire atmosphere of my frugal life was left behind, an anchor I was about to cut loose. As I stood on the veranda of my suite on the Queen Isabella, watching the Miami skyline recede, I opened the safe and took out the little red ledger. It was empty now, save for the final, original figure on the last page, the number that had once defined me. I walked to the railing, and, with a strange mix of reverence and finality, I tore out the last page. I crumpled it into a tight ball, kissed it goodbye, and tossed it into the wake, churning behind the ship. It was an emotional exorcism. The money was gone. The expectation was gone. The old Eleanor was gone. I sat down on a deck chair. Jules, my delightful, efficient butler, appeared with a glass of crisp champagne. "Enjoy the sail away, Mrs. Vance," he said with a genuine warm smile. I raised the glass. "Jules, please call me Eleanor." "And I intend to. You're catching me on the Red Sea leg of the grand voyage. We're heading toward the Asian ports. I'm currently wearing a ridiculous sun hat and a caftan I bought on the ship. My skin, which used to be the color of untouched ledger paper, is finally starting to see the sun. The first month, the Caribbean loop was a necessary decompression. I ate lobster every night. I swam in waters the color of lapis lazuli. I slept until 10 a.m. I was deliberately, gloriously unfrugal. But it was in South America that the real shift happened. In Buenos Aires, I signed up for a beginner's tango class. Me, Eleanor, the woman who hadn't cut loose since the 1970s. I was clumsy, I was slow, and I was laughing until my sides ached. The instructor, a beautiful, patient man, told me that I moved with the passion of someone who had just discovered the dance. I realized that's exactly what it was. I was discovering my own long-dormant life. It was in Argentina that the next barrage from my daughters arrived. Diana, having failed in court, tried a different tactic: financial terrorism. The email was titled, "Urgent, Liam's Future," and it detailed, in excruciating and inflated terms, the cost of an emergency tutor for my grandson. She claimed she was tapped out, and that the least I could do was offer a loan, secured against the house. I was sitting in an ornate old cafe, enjoying a strong Argentine coffee and a media luna. I read the email, and the immediate familiar guilt, the programmed reflex of the responsible mother, tried to kick in. But the scent of jasmine and the sound of distant accordion music drowned it out. I typed my reply. "That sounds very expensive, dear. I'm afraid I'm too poor to help." I knew that every cent she thought I had left was being paid to the charter ship, moving me toward the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. I attached a photo of the stunning, multicolored street art in the La Boca neighborhood, a vibrancy they would never know. And then I finally, decisively blocked her primary email address. The power wasn't in the block. It was in the complete absence of guilt. In Morocco, in the chaotic, thrilling souk of Marrakesh, I learned the art of the perfect, unapologetic haggle. I wasn't haggling to save money, but for the sheer pleasure of the game, the human connection. I bought a stunning, jewel-toned silk scarf, a color I would never have dared wear before. This was where Clara made her move. A package arrived on the ship, routed through the cruise line's complex logistics. It was a framed photograph of her daughter Lily, in her white First Communion dress, looking angelic. The card was carefully handwritten, a masterpiece of passive-aggressive sentimentality. "We miss you, Mother. Lily asks about her gran every day. We hope you find peace, and that whatever this trip is, it's worth the price of family." I smiled, and I used the scarf I bought to wrap the photograph. I walked it to the ship's post office and sent it back to her, with a simple, untraceable note. "I have found peace, darling. It's beautiful here. The price of family should never be my life. See you when I see you." I spent the next hour sitting by the pool, the Moroccan sun on my face, the scent of expensive suntan lotion in the air. I had paid for my own golden years, and the currency of that payment was freedom from their judgment. I've had to disembark for a few days here in the South Pacific, a quick transfer between vessels for the remote island leg. I'm sitting in a small, thatched roof bungalow, talking to you now, looking out at a lagoon that simply defies description. It's the color of melted emeralds. I want to talk about the final act of their desperation. After the court defeat, after the failed emotional pleas, they tried to leverage the one thing I couldn't completely liquidate, the house. They sent a single, formal letter, addressed via registered mail to my home, and forwarded to the cruise line. It was from a different law firm, a specialist in property law. The letter stated their intention to contest the title on the grounds of pre-inheritance tenancy, arguing that they had a common law right to the property due to years of assumed legacy. It was a desperate, grasping attempt to seize the last vestige of my wealth. I read the letter and called a lawyer I had found through Mr. Sterling, a sharp, kind woman specializing in trusts and estates. "Eleanor," she said, "it's a baseless claim. They're bluffing. It will cost them a fortune to pursue." "I know," I replied, "but I want to end it. I want to cut this line entirely." I instructed her to draft a new will. A final, definitive document. The house, the final asset, was to be immediately transferred to a charitable trust established in Harold's name for the promotion of literacy. The will specified that Clara and Diana were to receive $1 each, the legal minimum to prove they had not been forgotten. When the lawyer asked if I wanted to inform them, I simply said, "No, let them waste their time and money fighting over something I've already given away. They will find out when the final documents are filed, after I am truly gone. Let the charity know they are receiving the gift from the frugal one who finally learned to spend." The feeling of signing that will was the true climax of my liberation. I hadn't just spent their inheritance, I had removed the entire structure of my past obligations. I am now heading to Australia, then up to the fjords of Norway, and finally back down through the Mediterranean. My golden passport, the schedule, the suite, the continuous motion, is the only thing that matters. I see my daughter's pictures occasionally. I haven't blocked their feeds, I've just muted them. I see the endless, expensive scramble. The new mortgages, the desperate scramble for prestige, the constant need to project an image of effortless wealth. They are still trapped in the cage of their own making. And I, Eleanor Vance, the once frugal bookkeeper, am sitting here, watching a South Pacific sunset, the money well spent, the ledger forever closed. The price of this view, this wind, this complete, uncompromising peace, it was the price of their entitlement. And I paid it with great pleasure. I urge you, if you are saving for a tomorrow that doesn't include you, stop. The greatest return on investment is the joy you experience in the moment. Book the trip. Buy the shoes. Take the course. Your nest egg belongs to the person who put it there. And that person is you. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm afraid I have a date with a scuba instructor and a school of tropical fish. I'm too poor to wait. I've had a lot of time on these open seas to think about money, about inheritance, and about what the phrase net worth actually means. My daughters defined my worth by the six-figure number in that little red ledger. They saw an asset to be preserved, a resource to be tapped later. They believed that by refusing to spend it, I was proving my love, proving my responsibility, and proving my predictability. They confused financial stability with a vow of poverty. They confused prudence with permanent servitude. But here is the truth, the core philosophy that took me 70 years and $250,000 to finally buy. The true purpose of savings is to fund the life you want, not to anchor the life you feel you owe others. When they called me frugal, I thought I was wise. Now I see I was just delayed. I was waiting for the perfect time, the perfect permission, and the perfect people to value my time. I gave them the opportunity to show they valued me, not my bank account, by simply asking them to pay for a plane ticket. They failed that test, citing a cost that was meaningless to their actual income. They decided my existence was an expense. So I inverted the equation. I didn't lose my mind. I lost my misplaced sense of obligation. I spent the inheritance, yes, but what I acquired was immeasurable. A year of sunsets over different oceans, the ability to converse with people from every continent, the sheer joy of dancing badly in a new city. That is an investment that pays daily dividends and happiness, something no stock certificate can offer. They tried to freeze my bank account. They ended up freeing me. My advice to anyone watching this, whether you are 25 or 75, is this. Your real net worth is the sum of your experiences. If your savings are so sacred that they prevent you from truly living, then they aren't a safety net. They are a very expensive prison. The golden passport isn't just a cruise. It's the right to say, no thank you, my life is too valuable to wait any longer. It's the moment you trade the theoretical security of the far-off future for the absolute certainty of the present moment. I am Eleanor Vance, and I've never been richer.